Hey guys, this is Josh here, the Gray Bearded Green Beret. Just wanted to tell you about a product I'm really excited. It's finally finished after months and months of development with North American Rescue Products. I finally have my own IFAK, the Gray Bearded Green Beret IFAK, Individual First Aid Kit. Kind of in that search for the perfect IFAK and what I would want in my personal first aid kit. There were a lot of options out there and I never could find exactly what I wanted. So in working with North American Rescue, they were kind enough to help me develop this kit that is also now available to you. Generally, I'm teaching the 5 B's of wilderness first aid. And then if you've seen my wilderness medical film that was produced by the Survival Summit, you would know I also advocate carrying an IFAK for those types of emergencies. If you're a concealed carry person or a person that carries a gun for a living, if you're carrying for everyday carry, if you're carrying a firearm, then you should also expect that someone else that you would need to use that on is also going to have a firearm or something that can cause injury. So you should be carrying an IFAK. Anytime you think EDC, think IFAK as well. This is more designed for combat trauma. But if you think about kind of the world we live in today, you know, between crime, active shooters, social unrest, what have you, you know, the chance of you sustaining some sort of a gunshot wound that would be typically thought of as far away on a battlefield is not such a stretch these days. So that's why I think that everybody should carry an IFAK. This is perfectly sized. You can put this in a cargo pocket. You could put this in your glove box or your car, in your go bag, you know, what have you. I recommend having a few of these on hand personally. This follows the MARCH protocol, the military protocol. All right, and that stands for massive hemorrhage, airway, respirations, circulation, and hypothermia prevention. And really, the circulation and hypothermia prevention is more of a kind of a shock treatment, shock prevention kind of thing. So I'll talk to you a little bit about how I designed this kit and why some of these components are in there. All right, it's got conveniently marked tearaways. You have a content list of what's inside the kit, so you can kind of reference that without opening it. That is in there. You also have your personal protection, right? This is a set of nitrile gloves, these are black talons. They're really good heavy duty gloves from North American Rescue. This is to protect yourself from other person's bodily fluids and also kind of keep the wound from getting additional junk introduced. Then for massive hemorrhage, if we're talking about massive hemorrhage, and I don't want to really teach you everything you need to know about what's in these kits, I recommend my Thinkific module on bleeding control, as well as my wilderness medical film, but I will go over kind of quickly what's in here. The tourniquet for massive hemorrhage. This is massive hemorrhage on an extremity, so your arms or your legs, this is what you would use. And this one is sealed inside the package, so I want you to think of this not so much as your quick access tourniquet. This is your secondary tourniquet, because if you've taken either that module or watched the film, when you're down to seconds mattering in between life and death and you throw a tourniquet on, if that tourniquet doesn't work, your next step is to throw a second tourniquet on even closer to the heart to try to prevent yourself from bleeding out or prevent another person from bleeding out for that matter. So this is definitely a case where 2 is 1 and 1 is none. All right, one tourniquet may not be effective. So if it's down to seconds for a life-threatening bleed like that, you need a secondary tourniquet. This is a secondary tourniquet inside. I also recommend that you have a loose tourniquet that you can reach quickly and throw on as quickly as possible. Then if you need a secondary tourniquet, that's inside your IFAK. Start getting into a junctional area, meaning the area where, you know, an extremity meets the torso. Then you start getting into wound packing and pressure dressings. So what I've put in here for wound packing is some combat gauze. This is a hemostatic. You push this in as deep as you can, try to get it right up against the severed vessel. And it also provides some compression once you pack this in. And then chase that with some normal S-rolled gauze. All right, a lot of times these wounds, these cavitations that come especially from a gunshot wound are large and they need to be filled so that you can get adequate pressure onto that wound. So you have combat gauze, chase it with some S-rolled gauze, and then you have a 4-inch emergency trauma dressing that can be used to provide some pressure on that. Or you could simply use the S-rolled gauze and this as a pressure dressing without packing the wound. Just depends on the type of wound you have. Again, I recommend you get the training to go along with these, but that's what's in there. for massive hemorrhage to the extremities and to the junctional areas. That's what that's for. All right. When you start getting into the airway, I've included a size 28 nasopharyngeal airway. This is basically a nasal trumpet. It's designed to bypass everything and keep that airway open. And it also has some lube attached to the back of it, so you can lube that up so that it goes inside the nostril that much easier. So I recommend you get training on these as well. These are sized, to each individual person, but 28 seems to be about the average and the most useful. So that's in there for your airway. As far as respirations or compromise in the respirations, we're dealing with sucking chest wounds, right? I've got hyphen vent chest seals. This is a twin pack. You have an entrance wound, you also have an exit wound most likely. So these are designed to help you seal those. Anything basically from nose to navel, you need to start thinking about, developing a tension pneumothorax, which is another problem that's down the line if you don't seal that up, right? So that's what these are for. And additionally, these wrappers can be used, right? You're not limited to one gunshot wound, all right, an entrance and an exit. You may have multiple gunshot wounds, but you only have 2 chest seals, all right? This is designed for one for the front, one for the back, one for the entrance, one for the exit, if you want to look at it that way. So another thing that I've added that I think is missing in most kits is some flat pack surgical tape, all right? The reason I added this is if you have multiple wounds or this is not sticking all that well, you have some tape right there so that you can actually seal this down a little better with the tape, or you can actually use any of these wrappers. They're occlusive. They're not going to allow air passage. So if I needed to improvise a secondary one, I could use the wrapper from this chest seal in conjunction with this tape, and I can make a nice seal if I need to. All right, so it's got a little bit of improvisation, at least facilitating the improvisation built into the kit. So that's the design intent behind having that. And of course you can use the tape for any of your other wounds, but that's the reason that it's in there. All right, so that takes us through respirations as far as circulation and maintaining fluid. That goes back to massive hemorrhage, which we talked about with the tourniquet, with the S-roll gauze, the combat gauze, and the flat pack emergency trauma dressing. It may not be a massive hemorrhage and you're just dealing with maintaining that level of blood volume with a simpler wound, and that's what you would use. You just use whatever's appropriate for that particular wound. Another thing that I would recommend that you add for the H portion of March protocol, the hypothermia management, is a lot of times you're going to have adequate clothing. A lot of times in your shelter kit or in your go bag, you have a way to keep your body temperature up. So if you don't, though, a simple thing to add is just one of these simple Mylar space blankets. It's pocket size. You can add this to any kit, and this may be all you have to help prevent hypothermia. But this is best used, of course, in conjunction with fire and shelter and appropriate clothing for the environment you're in. But this is definitely something I recommend you add. So with that, the last thing that I would add that's not included inside the kit, because you probably need it for rapid access, but it should be in your kit, is some trauma shears. Right? This allows you to expose any of the wounds, see what you're actually working with, and see what from this kit is most appropriate to use. So the perfect kit, if I was to put it together, would be the GB2 IFAK in conjunction with your primary tourniquet, which should be in your pocket, some shears so that you can open it up and see what you're working with, and of course for hypothermia management, something simple like a little Mylar space blanket that fits in your pocket or fits inside your kit will work wonders. So that's what we've been working on for several months. Really excited to bring that to you now and make that available on the graybeardtogreenberet.com website. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you in the woods.